I will try to be short. I have 30 minutes, but let me start with a content note. Quite a lot of what I'm going to talk about will be about suicide and about violence. So if anyone feels triggered by this, please feel free to leave whenever you have the feeling that you should. I'm very sorry. I still think that the content is important enough to share this with you. The first question I would like to stress is the location where we are in at the moment, which is, you know it quite well, right at the border between Upper Austria and Salzburg. This place here where we are at the moment is in Upper Austria. We are in the Upper Austrian part of the country. And Upper Austria, I think you learned that probably from Silvia or from the news, had an election last year in September 2021. And these elections, in my view, were very relevant to the topic for many reasons. One of them being that a completely new party called MFG, which is something like, well, it's a lot of friendly terms. It's about freedom and justice and all this already in the abbreviation of the party. This party got 6.2% out of nothing, out of the blue. It was not existing before that. And before this party, which has fundamental rights in his title, because the G in MFG stands for fundamental right, this party, as I said, out of the blue, made it to 6.2% with one single topic, which was the COVID-19 crisis, in particular the reactions of the government on the COVID-19 crisis, in particular the obligation to get vaccinated. More interesting, in my view, is even where those voters come from. Those roughly 50,000 voters voting for this party, out of the blue, they come, for example, from the Conservative Party. From the 50,000 that voted for MFG, 34,000 came from the ÖVP, and another 14,000 are from the FPÖ, which is the right-wing populist party in this country. So if you look into who is voting for this, you see quite a lot of people voting or formally having voted for the conservatives or for the right-wing parties in this country. We are, I repeat, in Upper Austria, and from here to the northern parts of the Attersee, it's about 48 minutes by car. About 48 minutes by car from here in Upper Austria, a general practitioner was working. Her name is Lisa Maria Kellermeyer. And Lisa Maria Kellermeyer became very well known in this country, unfortunately, after her death, because she, as far as we know, committed suicide roughly a week ago. In this country, with this party, with a party whose leader, by the way, is running for the next election in a few months for the Austrian presidency, and who is, by the way, a lawyer, interestingly, by his background. In this country, Upper Austria, this party publishes a press release after the death of this general practitioner that I want to share with you in quite some detail. This is the press release. This is the original text. I didn't manipulate anything. It's in German, obviously. I will try to translate it in the best way I can. So the headline is how the suicide of an apparently depressed doctor is exploited. And within the text, you find then something like, Austrian advocates for authoritarian measures have found a new martyr, a 36-year-old doctor who for a month had defamed unvaccinated people, took her own life, apparently on the second try. The reason opponents of vaccination allegedly drove her to suicide. Apparently, the mainstream part of Austria has now resumed the hunt for the unvaccinated and defames everyone who has justified concerns about the sometimes massive side effects of vaccination and the authoritarian political approach. The doctor was a prominent opponent, or you could perhaps also translate this with enemy. The German word is Bekämpferin. So she was a prominent opponent of people who were critical of the government's measures. She had problems running her practice profitably, shared numerous false reports, and peddled the alleged threats from anti-vaccination in the media. Peddled the alleged threats from anti-vaccination in the media. All the English translations, just to repeat this, are mine. They are not the original. The German text is the original. So what you read here is something about authoritarian measures, about a new martyr found by some kind of mainstream media, defaming unvaccinated people, leading to a resume of the hunt against those people within an authoritarian political climate. The truth behind this case, at least in my version of the truth, looks a little bit more like this. This is one of the emails that Mrs. Kellermeyer received, and I will not translate them in detail, but trust me, they are brutal, they are, of course, illegal, and they did not necessarily lead to an appropriate, in the sense of a helpful reaction of the authorities during the lifetime of that person. And when I followed this case, quite similarly to a day-to-day experience that I'm making in this whole COVID exercise all of us are going through, I found myself driven back to one of the key moments in my political perception about what's going on in the world. On the very first day, Donald Trump came into office. And on that very first day, this interview that you're going to listen for 40 seconds, this interview was screened then from one of his then spokespersons about, I will jump for a slide, give me a second, about a very simple question, which is, how many people are here to be seen? On the right side, this is the Obama inauguration, and on the left side, you see the Trump inauguration, and there were claims made by people from the Trump campaign that this is larger than this. And then this interview was given in a major...
Not answer the question of why the president asked the White House press secretary to come out in front of the podium for the first time and utter a falsehood. Why did he do that? It undermines the credibility of the entire White House press office on day one.
Don't be so overly dramatic about it, Chuck. You're saying it's a falsehood, and they're giving Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts to that. But the point remains.
Wait a minute. Alternative facts? Alternative facts, 4 of the 5 facts he uttered. The one thing he got right was Zeke Miller. 4 of the 5 facts he uttered were just not true. Look, alternative facts are not facts. They're falsehoods.
Entschuldigung, wir hören nichts mehr.
Thank you for this intervention. I needed to switch the mic on again. It was my fault, sorry. So this reminds me, or this statement reminded me of one of the very first lessons we teach our students when they enter law school, which is a very old Roman saying, which is, da mihi factum, dabo tibi jus. Give me the facts, just tell me what happened, and I will tell you what the legal answer to this is. And my hypothesis of this presentation now is, this is at stake at the moment. This is what we are seeing, that this distinction between what is really happening, somebody is committing suicide because she was chased by some criminals for a month and they were not helpful in helping her, and that what is getting out of this, which is there is a martyr born by an authoritarian regime discriminating the few intelligent people in the country, this borderline is no longer there. It's the thing we are debating about. And we are debating about this mainly in social media, and we are mainly debating this every day, every time, every one of us, be it that you are part of this debate or you are not. For one more example on this, I would like to go a little bit deeper into the Austrian recent corona politics, because I know that there are some people in the room who know better than I about this, but all the others should learn about that. And this is about the acting Minister of Health. His name is Johannes Rauch. Johannes Rauch is inter alia active on Twitter. And when you read about Johannes Rauch's tweets on Twitter, you find statements like this one: my claim given yesterday in Austria's most prominent broadcast unfortunately was wrong. We need to fix that on Twitter, which is 100 times smaller, obviously, than Zeitenbild 2. I did not hear anything about that on Zeitenbild 2, unfortunately, so in the broadcast. Something like this statement here: the situation has changed significantly. Omicron is less dangerous than the others. We have the vaccination, we have new drugs, and therefore everything changed. 90% less risk than before. Or something like this: the regulation eliminating the obligation to wear masks indoors was leaked. And then he tweeted, well, listen, you know, this is just a leak, it might change. Unfortunately, it did not change. It's just the text as it was leaked on that day. And Rauch is also, interestingly, actively deleting tweets. Rauch or one of his people, I don't know who's doing this. So someone having access to the Twitter account of Johannes Rauch. So this tweet on the left side, which is about a claimed relation between suicidality of younger people and the crisis, was deleted, as well as the one on the right hand was deleted, where he said that he will no longer tweet, that he will abstain from tweeting, on COVID at least. This claim on the left side, which is about the suicide issue with young people, was heavily criticized on Twitter, inter alia, by one of the, if I may allow myself the judgment, one of the leading experts in the world on suicides within the youth, clearly indicating that this is wrong, that this is not that easy. And Rauch then answering with something like, you know, I've spoken to someone who told me that there is this relationship. And all this, by the way, happening on Twitter right after Rauch already having indicated some days before that he will not debate COVID on Twitter. Sorry, right? This is, again, an original statement. And after all this fuss, again, the statement, I will no longer tweet, in this time in one of the traditional journals of Austria. And again, not true, again, tweets from him, and even people reminding him of the fact that he had promised that he would no longer tweet. So, the simple answer that we constantly see in the situation we are in when we see such phenomena is, let's change the law. We need to do something against hate, or we need to do something against misinformation, we need to do something against the bad things in the world, and let's do it by the law. When it comes to the law, unfortunately, I must remind you, if I may, I'm old enough for that, about two fundamental issues of the internet. The first one leads back to 1993, almost 30 years ago, when this cartoon was published in The New Yorker, one of the mainstream intellectual papers in the US. Already in 1993, there was a cartoon indicating that the internet is about machine communication. It's machines talking to each other, and it's quite difficult to tell who is sitting in front of the machine. There's a white dog telling a black dog, you know, the internet is cool because nobody knows you are a dog. That is known at least since 1993. Second issue, known at least since 1996. Governments of the industrial world, you have no sovereignty where we govern, where we come together. That's the main claim of John Perry Barlow. No sovereignty where we gather, that's the original term. John Perry Barlow in 1996. The internet is borderless, at least in principle, by definition. So it's machines talking with each other in a borderless environment, and it's quite difficult to gain something like digital sovereignty there. The situation we are in at the moment, the students of me will remember those two slides because I showed them already when I presented my course. The situation we are in at the moment in Europe looks like this in 2018. Just a few, very few players, most of them, if not all of them, being US driven. And you know that from my presentation. I did not show another slide on this with purpose because I wanted to show it here now, which is the difference or the development since 2018 when I got this from. So this is from 2021, and there is an interesting change here, which is that TikTok is exploding. TikTok is exploding in a way that is really remarkable. TikTok downloads in 2021 5,000 times in every single minute. In every single minute, 5,000 people decide to use that app. So this picture that I showed during my presentation, which is about the hamburger, is inaccurate for many reasons. One of them is it's no longer true that China is just running the hardware. They are going to run the software as well. And it's also not true because there is quite a lot missing here. Thank you to one of my students who rightly mentioned this. Quite a lot of players missing here in this picture. In particular, Africa is missing, but also players like Russia are missing. And I would like to use the last 10 minutes of my presentation to go a little bit more into detail with Russia. And Russia, in this case, has something to do with this person, whom you met already yesterday in your presentation, who, if I understood the vibes yesterday correctly, is seen in a way like a mixture between crazy and I don't know what, right? Don't urge me to use the word. So something in between. So this guy did something very interesting in this year because he made an offer. He made a legally binding offer in April 2022 to buy Twitter for $44 billion, which is roughly about 5,000 euro for every single Austrian as a price to buy that company. And this might be crazy, right? And it might be strange or whatever, but it's a legally binding offer. There's a contract and there is law and clauses and all this on this. And you might speculate why he was doing this. There are all kinds of speculation out there why he did this. But interestingly, one of the things he did only 3 months later was that he revoked that offer. And the question for every lawyer, obviously, in the room is, why did he revoke that offer? And again, there might be legal arguments and there might be psychological arguments whatsoever. I don't know. I just tell you that I really envy that person, because this is the attorney writing the papers and the letters for Mr. Musk in this. So there is a legal paper, the revoke of the offer, out there on the internet. And it's plenty of boring legal text. You don't need to go through this if you are not really interested in the case. One of the key arguments given by that lawyer is that he says that for nearly 2 months, Mr. Musk has sought the data and information necessary to make an independent assessment of the prevalence of fake or spam accounts on Twitter's platform. So how many of the people acting on Twitter are real people, and how many of them are bots run by, put your paranoia in here, right? Run by someone, one of your fears. And the estimation that Musk says that Twitter is giving is roughly 5% of the tweets. Every 5% of all the tweets. That's what Musk says that Twitter is saying. And he argues that probably the amount is dramatically higher and he doesn't get proper information, and this is why he may revoke his offer. This is the legal case, the legal argument. And be reminded, it's not that simple to tell whether it's a machine or a dog or a human being sitting in front of the tweet that is then spread around in the world. And there is a whole industry out there with solutions trying to help you to find out how many of your followers are bots or machines or secret services chasing you. And that's not only completely hypothetical. This is just from my timeline from yesterday. I got quite a heavy media coverage yesterday by coincidence, and the outcome of this is inter alia that I have a lot of new followers looking like these guys here, right? And the last one, interestingly, is even indicating that he's not a bot, right? Isn't that nice? He's telling me you are not a dog, right? He's not a dog here. And this has, of course, to do with Russia, because there are quite a lot of rumors out there, and again, it's up to your paranoia how many of them you believe, and up to your political opinion how important you think that this is. But there are quite a lot of rumors out there that we are strategic targets of misinformation of both sides in all social media using the instruments that I just superficially mentioned here at the moment. And this is obviously not only the case for Twitter. So in particular, if you are on Instagram, many of you of the younger are on Instagram, I would very warmly invite you to have a closer look into who is really following you and whether you really know those people, and whether you are sure that this is a person behind that account and not a machine. And what does all this mean for the law? Because it's a lawyer standing in front of you at the moment. That reminds me again of the situation somewhere in 2000, when all this internet thing really got crazy. There were two main decisions taken then, also in Europe, in the so-called e-commerce directive. The first one was the country of origin principle, which is the answer in some way to this you have no sovereignty where we gather problem, which is that every information society service provider should be controlled by its home country. And the others should freely allow this service, at least within the European Union. And the second principle is a kind of notice and take down principle, which is the legislator does not really care about content to be uploaded. There's no ex ante control of everything that is going to be uploaded. There's just an ex post control if someone claims that something is infringing the law. That is in 2000. Some of the people in the room were not even born yet then. And the big strategic question now, then, within the von der Leyen Commission, by the way, was what should we do with these principles in this environment that I tried to briefly describe? Is there a legal answer on this? And the answer is yes and no. There is a legal answer because we have a huge new text. It's the Digital Services Act, and I could give a week of teaching on the Digital Services Act. So there's plenty of new things there trying to regulate platforms more intensely and differently from today. But the main decisions, the country of origin principle and the notice and take down principle are still there. And I think it's very justifiable that they are there. There are very good reasons for doing this in the way we see it in the DSA. But we may not expect, therefore, that anything of the fundamental problems that I'm trying to describe here will be changed by the DSA because it doesn't touch those 2 points, and I think it can't touch that 2 points. Notice and take down, Article 5, no monitoring obligation in Article 7, if you want to look into this a little bit more in detail. So what should we do then if the DSA is not the exit that all of us hope for? I don't know. I just want to share one simple answer with you, which is Marshall McLuhan, the answer to the machine is in the machine. So if you don't know about the dogs, then perhaps try to regulate the things that are in front of the dogs. That goes back, that idea again, to Lawrence Lessig, 1999, Code and Other Laws of Cyberspace, who already made the argument then we are regulated on the internet not only by East Coast code, which is law, but also by West Coast code, which is IT, infrastructure, architecture. So one simplistic answer could be, let's look into the machine regulation, therefore, a little bit more closely. And that's happening right at the moment. One example on this. Many of you were in lockdown during COVID, and many of you had the problem that all universities had the issue whether you were cheating during exams when sitting at home. There were all kinds of rules coming out and discussions whether video surveillance would be legal and all this, right? And this is an attempt to regulate human behavior. Somebody is addressing you as a human and tries to put rules on you. This is a complicated exercise, and it's not often a very successful exercise, as we see. So there's also a very simple answer to this. Simply block the internet when there is an exam. There are plenty of countries such as Syria, Sudan, Algeria, but also Uzbekistan, Jordan, Iraq, and so on, who solve this problem by simply turning off the internet during exam time. Stop, end, full story. And the question I have to all of you, therefore, at the end of this, in particular to the Europeans, but of course not only to the Europeans, is do we want something like this in Europe? Thank you. And I changed my hat now because I may announce now that there are going to be 2 work groups, one of them being in German, run by Iris Eisenberger and her team in Seehaus. So those of you wishing to hear Eisenberger should go down there. There's another one in English here, led by myself. So please feel free to move if you prefer. If you don't, I assume that you stay here. And in the agenda, there is written that there should be a workshop. A workshop is a terrible exercise for the teacher and often also for the students. But I will take this now, and I will misuse you, in particular the non-Austrians in the room, to please give me feedback on how you perceive the COVID regulation in your home country. And I would like you, Peter, to ask you to switch the video off now, right? Okay.